Today, we're going to hear from Dr. Nita Shattuck. Professor Nita Shattuck has faculty appointments in the NPS Operations Research Department, Systems Engineering Department, and the MOVES Institute. She founded the Human Systems Integration Program at NPS in 2003, serving as the program director for 5 years. Dr. Shattuck directs the research of the Crew Endurance Team here. She's mentored junior faculty, postdoctoral fellows, and graduate students, and has advised over 100 master's theses. She received her PhD in behavioral sciences from the University of Texas School of Public Health and has over 100 publications. She's the recipient of the Department of Navy's Distinguished Civilian Service Award about 5 years ago. Dr. Shattuck's work has resulted in sweeping changes to U.S. Navy policy that now mandates the use of circadian-based watch bills. And she's going to explain what that means, I imagine. I think that for me, kind of the best introduction to Nita and the importance of her work is I took my family for a really nice tour of the guidance missile cruiser USS Princeton. And as I came on board and I met the captain, and they were very polite and respectful to me, which was cool in front of my kids, you know, that was awesome. And they said, "Oh, you're from NPS. We use Nita Shattuck's work. And our entire crew schedule is based on the work that she and NPS has done." And they actually said that in front of my kids too. And that was the thing that impressed my kids the most. So with that, please join me in welcoming to the Provost Lecture Series, Dr. Nita Shattuck and her talk, "The Sun Never Sets on Crew Endurance Research."
Thank you so much. We're all spread out here. It's kind of an interesting way for me to talk to you all, but welcome to hear about this. So, and Scott, thank you so much for that introduction as I talk about this work. So today I want to share some of the things that we've uncovered on this NPS journey with my truly amazing colleagues and students. It has indeed been a team effort, as anybody who engages in something like this knows. So that includes some of you here in the room today. You know who you are. 23 years ago, I landed here at Naval Postgraduate School in beautiful Monterey, California. It's one of the most beautiful spots on the planet. And I've been to a lot of them, and I can tell you, we know how lucky we are. And as you know, the other thing that's really amazing is our students. They are humble heroes, and they help direct our research and keep us in line, telling us the things that are really important. Our students face real problems out in the operational environment. All we have to do is listen to them, and they will tell us what's really important. As I began my academic career in 2000, 23 years ago, I came to appreciate how much I could learn from my students. And if you're as lucky as I've been, they invite you into their workplace to help them come up with solutions to their problems. I love this cartoon by Jeff Bacon. He's a graduate of NPS, but also a cartoonist, and he gives me permission to use his work. When I began teaching here at NPS, I didn't know what a SWO was. Some of you may not know what a SWO is. I came from the aviation community, and that's where we had crew rest all the time. But I quickly learned that SWO stood for Surface Warfare Officers. So these are the people who drive and operate the surface ships. So that's a SWO, and they are really undermanned and often overtired. So my students told me about these crazy work schedules that they were on. They call them 5 and dime schedules. Coming from the aviation community, I really thought they were pulling my leg. I didn't believe them. I thought that can't be happening. But even worse, they wore the sleep deprivation like a badge of honor. The SWO motto back then was, "You can sleep when you're dead." They really said that. And this chart shows the 5 and dime schedule for one individual over 14 days. What you see, the blue rectangles indicate the opportunities for sleep, and yellow is when they're standing watch, 5-hour watch, and then white is when they're off watch. So you can see that in any consecutive day, they are never sleeping at the same time. Very, very hard for the circadian rhythm to adjust. It's a 15-hour day. But the submariners weren't any better, actually a little bit better maybe, because they're on an 18-hour day. I was appalled when I learned that a student from my home department, operations research, was the one who was responsible for this incredibly bad 6-12 schedule for the submarine fleet. It turns out in 1969, and I tell my students, your thesis can make a difference for the good or for the bad. So this one was for the bad. So in 1969, William Stolgitis recommended that, hey, submariners never see the light of day, so we'll just put them on an 18-hour day. So every 18 hours, it's morning again. Every day they're sleeping at a different time. So this is a 3-watch schedule that's shown here. And we know we can't adjust to anything other than about a 24-hour day. All right, just to recall what was going on back then, 9/11. So we had the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and decision makers had to decide what are we gonna, what's our response? And the Navy was called on. We're pushed to the forefront of this global war on terror. And soon after 9/11, the Navy aircraft carriers began bombing these Al-Qaeda terrorist networks. You all remember that. If you're old enough, you'll remember this. And they were doing these night and day attacks. So they had 2 carriers. One worked day ops and one worked night ops. For the night carrier, all their activities were shifted to support the crew. Breakfast was served in the late afternoon, evening. Other meals and activities were also shifted 12 hours. So we were contacted by the medical department because they were having serious problems with sleep and fatigue on the carrier. So we went out and collected data. And what you see here is in the green, this is, so what you want to do is you want to have less fragmented sleep. So, and you want to have sleep of longer duration. So the green triangles that you see here indicate individuals who are working below decks. So you work below decks and it's dark all the time, or it's whatever light, ambient light. But those individuals, you look at the people in red, those are the individuals who are working topside. Lots of topside operations because we're launching aircraft all the time. So those individuals, you think, well, they're not getting light. Well, actually they are. The light comes up, sun comes up in the morning, and then it's time for them to go to bed and get to sleep. Very, very hard for their circadian rhythm to adjust to that. So what you see here is that these individuals that were working topside also had much worse mood than the people working below decks. So here's kind of the bumper sticker. Sunlight affects our sleep, and it affects the sleep of sailors who are working topside that are trying to work nights and sleep days. The number of recruits in the Navy also went up significantly with wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we were able to help Recruit Training Command make better decisions about the amount of sleep recruits were allowed to get. And this is when President Rondeau was actually the CO out there at the time. We went out, we briefed them, we said, some of these recruits are as young as 17 years of age. They need more sleep. They actually need 8.5 to 9.25 hours of sleep. We said, hey, if you increase their sleep, we believe that they will retain the information better, their mood will be better, their attitudes, all of these things will be increased. And lo and behold, here you see some of the results for 3 years of test scores, standardized test material that they're all Navy recruits are tested on. What you see is in the 2 years, 2000, 2001, when they're getting only 6 hours time in bed, compared to when they're getting 8 hours time in bed. So significant differences. It's as if we've given them an infusion of IQ. And this is after controlling for ASVAB scores, because 9/11 had occurred. Maybe we're just recruiting smarter guys and gals. Maybe that's what's going on. So after adjusting for ASVAB entry scores, this is what we see. But insufficient sleep is not just a problem for the US Navy. The other services, including the Army, you all know who you are out there, they struggle to get enough sleep as well. For cadets at West Point, sleep deprivation begins on their first day at West Point. These horrible sleep patterns that they learn here often will persist throughout their careers. So with the encouragement of my mentor, Dr. Mary Carskadden of Brown University, we launched what turned out to be a 4-year longitudinal study of sleep in cadets at the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. And I acknowledge Larry Shattuck, who was actually there at the time, as a faculty member, and he told me, no, we'll never be able to do this. And we were able to do it anyway. So it worked great. I had a great colleague there. All right, so here's what we found. So I just told you how much sleep these young people need, right? And what you see in this red circle, this red oval, you can see how much sleep they're getting. This is over all 4 years. So each academic quarter, we collected data on them. So what you can see is in the fall, when we started out collecting data, you can see they're getting less than 5 hours of sleep on school nights, less than 5 hours of sleep. So is there any wonder that when you go and you talk to them, you see that you go and do a lecture up there, you see these cadets, they stand up against the wall. I couldn't figure out why they're standing up against the wall at the back. They would stand up. I'm like, what's going on? Did I do something? No, they stand up to keep from falling asleep. So anyway, you can see what happened. So they're accruing this significant sleep debt. When we compared it to one Ivy League school, you can probably guess which one I'm talking about. They were getting 2 hours per night less sleep than this Ivy League school. Our goals were to educate the academy leadership and encourage cadets to take better care of their own sleep habits. And we were pretty effective at advocating for them over this 4-year period. The academy started instituting early lights out policies and emphasized the importance of good sleep hygiene. This all worked great until, of course, a new superintendent came in and changed all the rules. But again, one of those things that we have to figure out, how do we manage, how do we keep those changes once we figure out what they are. I often tell people, is it still up there? It just went away on the screen. Okay, got it. I often tell people, if I had tried to get IRB, I'm looking at you all up there, if I tried to get IRB permission to conduct some of the studies that the Navy schedules were on, I would never have gotten permission to do it. They would never have, IRB would not have allowed me to do it. You're going to take healthy people and you're going to do what to them? No. So, but when I began studying sleep on Navy ships, I was walking into this ready-made sleep lab. These red pins indicate the locations around the globe where we've collected data for our studies. We just put this pin up at the very top. That's up in the Arctic. It actually should go all the way across the top, I guess. But anyway, so kind of gives you an idea. We've been at a lot of places. And here's a slide that shows you the ships that my team has studied throughout the years, or most of the ships. The red line up here indicates 8 hours of sleep. And what you will notice is that almost none of the crews are averaging even 7 hours of sleep. But there's 2 exceptions. One is about in the midpoint, which is LCS2 during rough water trials. I don't know if you can read that, but it says the sea state was 5 to 6. So the reason people were getting a lot of sleep is they were seasick and in their racks. And then I was on the ship, and I don't know if Captain Gray, I think he's online. Captain Gray was the XO on the ship when that was going on. So we have commiserated about this from time to time. But and then up at the top, the other ship that's getting more sleep is a Norwegian Coast Guard frigate. So we've not joined the ranks of getting adequate sleep yet. So we've continued to study sleep at sea, but it remains a problem. We've expanded our efforts to look at other things: workload, stress, psychological mood, mental health, insomnia. I've already talked about exposure to daylight and just exposure to light, bright light, dietary habits. All these things affect performance of sailors. So, but you may ask, well, why is it that sailors don't sleep more? So, of course, we looked at that. On this slide, you'll see one of the answers. You can see the work patterns. This is over 800 sailors. And so you can see they are working 7 days per week. And of the 105 sailors in this study, only 105 of them work 8 hours per day. You can see how they're incredibly overworked, and probably because there's not a lot of manning. Here's other sleep studies that we've done in operational settings. The team has been busy. I will just say that. All over, we're doing currently doing studies with F-35 Squadron. We're doing a study out at Air Force Academy. We're doing a study down at watch floors down in San Diego, secure watch floors. So there's that. And then again, we know that sleep, anyone who's read anything about sleep knows that sleep and memory are intertwined. I mean, really important. So we've done studies looking at sleep in military training and education. We've done several of these studies focusing on both Navy, Marine Corps, and Army schoolhouses. But it's not enough just to identify the problems. If we want to really make a difference, we must find viable solutions. So we look for small victories, places that we can change things to improve performance and make life better, the quality of life better for our military service members. One of those areas is in the work schedules that I've already talked about. So in this slide here, what you see is on the right, you can see that those are a lot of the schedules that when I started this work, many of the ships were working on these schedules, both the submarines and the surface community. If you can only man a 2-section watch bill, you're stuck over there in that yellow side over on the far left. It's going to be challenging. We like the ones that are in the green, kind of in the middle. We'll talk more about that. But we have a 3-section watch bill and a 4-section watch bill. Of course, the big challenge in the military is that we'd have 24/7 ops. It's not like, oh, we'll park the ship and just hang out for a while. There was a great thesis. I mean, so many great theses, but this was a great thesis by Lieutenant Don Roberts in OR. He came up with a potential solution for manning the watch. He said, and it was a circadian-based 3 on, 9 off schedule. Circadian being 24 hours. The time off watch and the time on watch add up to be 24 hours. So when we looked at this, we tried it out on one schedule. So it's often called the 3-9 schedule. 3 hours on watch, 9 hours off watch. Of course, that 9 hours off watch is when you're doing your other work. You know, it's not just off. But anyway, so that's the 3-9. We tried it out first on the USS Jason Dunham, a DDG. It was actually in its maiden voyage. They loved it, but we weren't quite sure what it was going to happen in terms of looking at performance. So in the military, we rarely get the opportunity to conduct experiments. Most of the work that we end up doing ends up being observational in nature. But this study was on the USS Nimitz, an aircraft carrier. One day I got a phone call from one of my former colleagues. I said I used to work in naval aviation. He calls me up and he says, "Hey, are you still doing that sleep stuff?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, can you come out and study my reactors?" I didn't know what a reactor was. I thought it was like some of his crew members that like are real sensitive and they overreact or something like reactors. No, it was not. So anyway, so he said, "Can you come out? We're having problems." So of course we were delighted to go out and study the crew. And here are some of the demographics from our study. So what we told him, we said, we have enough qualified watch standers that we can man a 4-section watch. You're doing 5 and dimes. That's crazy. You shouldn't be doing that. So he had been an aviator. He was an aviator, so he recognized the value of crew rest. So anyway, here's 2 of the crew members who are in the study. You can see these big smiles. So one of the tricks I learned early on is that sailors are just like kids. They love candy. So I go out to the ship, I take bags of candy with me, and I set up my shop typically on the mess decks. I have a big bowl of candy. And so they come and they swing by and they get some candy. And then when they see me in the, in the P-way or whatever, they give me these big smiles. So, and often they will participate. They know the value of the research. So it's pretty amazing to build these relationships over time. And yes, they gave us permission to use these photos. So, all right. You can see the motion logger actigraphs. It's like big aviator watches that they're wearing. So with those, we could actually collect their sleep, and we also collect performance on a thing called a psychomotor vigilance test, or a PDT, just a reaction time test. And here are the results from that reaction time test. When I looked at the same sailors working a 5 and dime and working a 3-9, what we see, it's a within subjects design, the same individuals, reaction times of crew members on the 3-9 were about 30% faster. And probably more importantly, on the 3-9, they had 40 to 50% fewer errors. So it's a, just kind of a no-brainer, faster and more accurate. Over the 2 weeks that we were studying them on the 5 and dime, their mood got significantly worse. So you can see the red going up, that's worse. However, it was not so for the 3-9. So again, all good things. So what have we learned over this line of research, and including this study? Here's some of our more important conclusions. Circadian watchbills are better than rotating non-circadian watchbills. And this effect becomes more evident when you have fewer watch sections. Fewer people are available. A 2-section watch bill should be avoided if at all possible. Sometimes it's not. And the amount of sleep that when we're comparing the 2 schedules, a 4-section circadian versus 4-section non-circadian, the sleep doesn't change. It's just the duration of the sleep, but the quality of the sleep changes significantly. And that's what I think, because you're sleeping when you're supposed to, when the body is expecting to sleep. So the recuperative effect of the sleep is improved because it's better timing of the sleep. It's all about changing the culture. To do that, you need to find the right change agent and the right message. So I love this quote about getting new ideas into the military mind. You first have to get the old one out, right? And also turning a ship around when it's going a certain direction, especially when it's surrounded by ice, is challenging. So I also learned that when you are invited to brief a 4-star, you need to be ready with answers. So when we're conducting the study on the Nimitz, the person in charge of naval reactors for the entire Navy was Admiral John Richardson. He was a 4-star admiral. Some of you may remember Admiral Richardson. So we were studying his reactor department sailors, so he requested that we brief him. We did, and he said, why can't we get crew rest, that aviator crew rest, for the rest of my tribe? And I said, well, there's no reason. We can do it. We can make it happen. You can make it happen. So that was a great idea. And then he points the finger at me and he says, well, you come up with guiding principles. Will you work with me on this? So these were the guiding principles. Of course, you have to, 4-star tells you, ask you if you'll do something. Right answer is yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. So here it was. So the focus should be on alert and engaged watchstanders. If you have somebody stand in the watch and they're not alert, they're not really standing the watch. So that was important. learn and understand the effects of good sleep practices. And so I go out to the Surface Warfare Officer School, have been talking to all the PXOs, PCOs for years now to tell them about what are good sleep practices. You have to use a 24-hour circadian rhythm to set the foundation for the work that you're going to do. And you want to build a stable daily schedule that maximizes rest opportunities at the same time each day. But we know that one size doesn't fit all. So you want to get supporting analysis before you come up with some crazy schedule on your own. So we try to, okay, don't try this on your own. Let us help you a bit. And that's one of the things that NPS has done a lot of. We realized that our messaging needed to change. Before I was just saying, you need more sleep. You need more sleep. And so rather than telling sailors and commands that need more sleep, we asked them, do you want to be stronger, more resilient, better endurance, even better looking, and heck, more virile? You want all those things? We even showed them how testosterone levels are lowered with sleep deprivation. And that message was heard. And here's another one of our messages that we put out, that we've been doing this for all these 2 decades, that sleep matters for the warfighter. This was a picture that was featured in National Geographic, who followed our work and came out and took some photos back in 2018. We published a handbook. Our first one, I think, came out in 2017. And then our second one is now out. I've got some here. We've got lots of copies if anybody wants their own copy, or you can download an electronic one. It's got guidance for implementing strategies that we identified for applying circadian-based watch bills. So you're welcome to come and get one of these after the talk. In that, there's a lot of information. For example, we show how what the non-circadian watch bills look like. We want people to avoid. That's the ones in the red in the center. The ugly ones are the ones on the yellow ones that, you know, if you have to do 2-section watch bill, that's what you're stuck with. And then the green are, of course, the good ones. So in a nod to Clint, we call them the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, and then we also have a website that we use to continue spreading the word. We know that it is essential to figure out how to ensure that these important changes don't revert once some new person comes in charge. So we've continued to work with senior leadership to get these behaviors set into official Navy policy. And as luck would have it, that same 4-star admiral who asked me to work on guiding principles was promoted to the highest rank in the Navy, Chief of Naval Operations. So he knew about our work, he supported the changes that were being made, and he was willing to buck the culture that had become such a part of the Navy. We've had success with both surface and submarine forces, and both now have policies in place that have mandatory circadian-based watch bills. So this is, I think, just a huge win for sailors throughout the Navy. I promised to tell you all a little bit about how to sleep better, right? Some of you came to hear that. So let me give you a few slides about that. First, I'm going to tell you about what decades of research findings tell us about when you don't get enough sleep. So this is kind of the bad news part, right? So the short-term effects, we can see the box on the left. It shows what happens when you get poor sleep over a short period of time, just a single day or a couple of days. You can see that you have degraded performance, more accidents. You're not able to be as vigilant, pay attention. You have reduced short-term memory, your mood suffers, all of these things, increased production of stress hormones. So bad news. But if we look in the center, this is what happens after weeks of sleep deprivation. So you can see this loss of motivation, morale. This is what we typically think about when we look at sailors, the things that we worry about. Slower rate of wound healing. We see it takes it longer to train, reduced immunity, caffeine dependency, higher accident rates. the bottom line is failure to accomplish the mission, which is the real challenge. That's what they're out there to do. And then on the far right, the long-term effects, one thing that we've seen a lot of is circadian scarring. That's where you have abused the circadian system to the point your body no longer remembers exactly how to sleep. There's ways to address that, but again, I think we see that in a lot of people in the military. We also see metabolic disorders, chronic disease, and from the Navy standpoint, inability to recruit and retain sailors. All right. So if you want to sleep like a pro, that was the bad news, right? All right, to scare you a little. Okay, but you want to sleep like a pro. So if you want to do that, you have to make a sleep plan. Think about it in advance. You want to set a bedtime early enough that you'll get 7 hours of sleep, exercise, sleep, discipline. You want to stick to this routine, protecting that circadian rhythm. We know that preparation starts during the day. Limit your caffeine and energy drinks to the first half of your workday. Chris said, hey, can I go get you a Starbucks? I'm like, no, you can't go get me a Starbucks. Thank you. Don't tempt me like that. Avoid eating too close to bedtime, especially heavy and rich foods. And alcohol. We've got a great series of slides that we just put together looking at the effects of alcohol. And it's just, I hate it. We live here in beautiful wine country. So anyway, it's bad for your sleep. Ideal sleeping conditions, completely dark, not even a pinhole of light. It should be quiet, or if some people say, oh, it's too quiet, I can't sleep. So a fan or white noise can help as well. Cool ambient temperature, we recommend 62 to 65 degrees. Yeah, that sounds cold, but it's the best sleep. To fall asleep and stay asleep, you have to have core body cooling. So that really helps with that. I also recommend keeping a notepad by your bedside in case you wake up during the night and think, oh no, what if I forget that tomorrow? And you're starting to think about it. Well, this will actually, you can jot it down on the notepad. And on the ship, one of the things that sailors complain about is smells. So that odors will wake them up during the night. And, we make the joke about the Taco Tuesdays and all this kind of thing. But I can tell you that there's multiple reasons for showering or bathing before bedtime. One is you smell better. And if you share birthing space with other people, it's a nice, polite thing to do. But it also helps you, that core body cooling that is going on. Your hands and feet have capillary beds that expand and allow that heat to dissipate. And that allows your body to cool and allows you to go to sleep. There's a 41-minute sleep talk on the NPS YouTube channel for those of you who didn't get enough information about sleep today. So, and here's the QR code up here at the top. So in my last few minutes, I thought I had 35 minutes.
Good to go.
Okay, good. I'm like, all right. In the last few minutes, I want to tell you about some of our ongoing efforts, but first I want to tell you about our recent trip to the Arctic. So in August 23, we set out to study the effects of noise, vibration, light, and extreme cold on the sleep, mental health, and well-being of crew members on an icebreaker in the Arctic. We traveled to latitude 85 degrees north, and I think we're at 39 here, so a long way. We were just shy of the North Pole. We wanted to go to the North Pole. I had to tell my 5-year-old grandson, no, I didn't get to see Santa Claus. We didn't make it. But we learned a lot about ice. We learned a lot about conditions that the Navy may be exposed to up there with this melting sea ice, melting polar ice. We also found out that there are still organizations that have much to learn about sleep. So while transiting the Arctic from Kodiak, Alaska to Tromsø, Norway, was a 6.5-week journey We crossed 10 time zones. However, the ship opted to remain on Alaska time as we made that transit. So, and then they decided we'll just make it in one giant shift, 10 hours at once. You can imagine my surprise and dismay. They have a sleep expert on board. They did not use my expertise. On the 23rd of September at 1900, most of the crew has been awake, working all day. The ship jumped time zones 10 hours to now it's 5 a.m. on the 24th of September. So they have another entire workday ahead of them. And the crew members were even encouraged to stay awake. They even threw parties to help people adjust to jet lag. This was their, so we still have some work to do, especially with the Coast Guard. Of course, with all these scientists on board, we had to do some zany experiments, right? And this one was with styrofoam cups. So we all got these markers and here's my attempt to draw the NPS emblem there. And so then we sent it down to the floor of the Arctic Ocean, down to 4,050 meters. And you can see the little cup there. You can see it just shrunk down. So that's what happened. I got it at home. I'll bring it into the office if anybody wants to see it. But anyway, we had to do these things. So the Arctic Ocean is different depths. I mean, some places very shallow, some places very deep. So, and we were doing a lot of other work on this mission, looking at water, the water conditions, salinity, all kinds of things. Temperature, of course. Yes, we received warnings about the dangers we were facing. And one of my students sent me this wonderful news clip from Ernest Shackleton. You guys know about Shackleton, right? An early polar explorer. And this was his effort to recruit for his polar exploration. I don't know if you guys can read it. It says, "Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, a safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success." So he sent me this. He said, I think you responded to the wrong ad. So here we are getting our poopy suits on. Of course, we're weeks away from help if something happens. The nearest country is Russia. We were pretty much the whole time, that was the closest to us. We also got warnings about polar bears, and yes, they attack without warning. You need to keep your distance. But we did get to see them up close in the wild, and they are so cute from a distance. So here is, this was the first mother and cub pair that we came across. We saw 14 polar bears in all. We would be just breaking ice, going along, and you look out, look down. Oh, we all had portholes in our staterooms. So it's really cool. You could see out, which is very cool. But not a Navy warship. I had to keep reminding myself, this is not a Navy warship. So, but you'd look out and you would see these tracks, and you could see where polar bears had been there at some point. And here's a photo I took of my favorite sunrise in the Arctic. The sun just peaked above the horizon before setting again, but you can see the light reflected in the melting sea ice. What a rare and special place. We were so honored to be able to study the Coast Guard crew and to witness the spectacular beauty of the Arctic. We still have a lot of work ahead of us to analyze all this data. We collected so much data, but we have a great team working on it. Dr. Chris McClernand, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Smith, right here are just two of the people on that team that are working on that now. Our team has a number of ongoing and planned projects. By the way, we also always have postdoc positions if anybody's interested. We're always looking for ways to expand our team, but we're doing more work with the circadian-based watchbills, both on ships and on watch floors. We're also doing currently work where we're looking at a Marine Corps F-35 squadron, We're looking at SWAS senior leaders at their sleep for longitudinal studies, and also looking at possibility of sailor or soldiers out at Fort Wainwright. We continue to do a lot of training on crew endurance. Looking at habitability, some of the things we do is we pass out what we call warfighter sleep kits, and we work on rack curtains and looking at pillows and mattresses, things to help with habitability. And so again, I started out talking about some of the work we were doing with light and how important it is. Light is very important. It tells us when it's day and when it's night. So we're doing some work with that, continuing to do some work with that, especially it's important in extreme latitudes like the Arctic. All right, this talk would not be complete without acknowledging the incredible colleagues and students I've had here at NPS and beyond. Your work ethic and your dedication continue to amaze and inspire me. Here's a few photos of data collection teams. We traveled near and far. And one special shout out to my all-time favorite colleague who retired last Friday after 53 years of service to our nation, Colonel Dr. Larry Shattuck. I would not have been able to do this work without your support and encouragement. You are my biggest hero, and I am your biggest fan. So I leave you today with this little bit of dad humor, and I thank you so much for your time. I don't know if you guys can you read it? Smith, yes, sir. I didn't see you in camouflage practice today. Thank you, sir. All right.
All right.
Questions? Yes.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Commander Chris Landis. I'm a computer science PhD student here. And I think you've got a plethora of studies and great results. And then a few slides ago, you listed some other studies that you intend to do. What additional value do you see from those? Even like there's a leadership study. Well, you've already studied a CO on a ship for a deployment, and you've already studied some aspects of the Army. So what's the added value of continuing these studies?
Well, right now what we're doing, we haven't really looked at mental health. And that's what we're really trying to look at. Mental health, we're also looking specifically at leadership. So one of the things that happens when you're sleep deprived is you lose your charisma. So you're not a good leader and you're not a good follower. So we think that this is going on. We want to document it. The only way you can ever make changes in the organization is to show them the data. Here's the data, this is the evidence. Try this, and this is what we think will happen. Great question.
Thank you, ma'am. One of the things that when we spoke before, that I think is part, the additional part of the answer that you said is that it's not just showing them the data, it's showing them their data.
Yes.
Right. That you seem to feel that makes a difference, that they listen more when it's their ship, not ships, even if it's the same class, the same base. Okay.
They always think they're special. Well, I don't really need that much sleep. I don't. So I think you're absolutely right, Scott. Yes.
I have a question about this. It's kind of two parts, but it has to do with circadian rhythms. And if a ship or plane changes longitude, obviously there's a different amount of sunlight during the day. And I saw you were going to study that, I guess, in the future, or that was on your list as longitudinal studies. And then that leads to.
But we're talking about longitudinal over time. So when I say a longitudinal study, that's over a significant period of time.
Okay.
So not just a single point in time, but so what we're going to be doing is looking at these leaders over an 18-month to 24-month period. And then we're going to track what is happening to their mental health, what is happening to them over time. And do we see changes? Do we see differences in their stress? Giving them an aura ring or a wearable, does that help their ability to manage their sleep and their stress levels? Those are questions we want to answer.
I think
that we still haven't answered.
Well, it's more about your circadian rhythms and how they're affected by the length of the day or when the sun comes up. If you're, if you're traveling, as I started, or if, the difference between, summer and winter.
Yeah.
The days are shorter now, all of a sudden, right, in the last month or two, and so I want to sleep more. And in the summertime, boy, I don't want to go to sleep at all. I just want to stay up all night, I certainly, I know that I stay up later in the summer than I do in the winter. Not for any other reason besides that I want to. So does your body need different amounts of sleep depending on the hours of daylight? There's the question.
That's a great question. We do not see any evidence that there's a difference in that. However, we have what we call behaviorally induced insufficient sleep syndrome. And where, so you up in the Arctic or Alaska or, wherever you may live, long days. Well, the sun's still up. I'm just gonna keep doing stuff. I'll mow my lawn at midnight because I can. So this is stuff that you're doing to yourself. Again, your body still needs that rest. So, but I think there is this tendency when it gets dark earlier, that's what happens as the days get shorter, you want to go to bed early, you get tired, you kind of want to start hibernating like some of these polar bears. So, and so light is really important for setting that, and we can control a lot of it. If we're not at the equator, is weaker a day and Yes.
So kind of related to that, and what you said earlier, what should have the Coast Guard ship done that you were on going from Alaska to Norway?
They
What's
should
the
have.
right answer?
They should have shifted, every time we crossed a time zone, they should have shifted. So we should have gradually, we're going to Norway, we knew where we were gonna end up. So we have 34 days to get there, 36 days, something like that. Anyway, as we're transitioning, every couple of days, change the clock, just 1 hour. Yes, back to you,
I
Julie.
just have something to add to that, and I have experience, at a point in my life, I worked on cruise ships.
Right,
And
right.
we would do these, world cruises around the world, and we cross the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, and Pacific Ocean's big ocean, takes a long time to get across. And you're going through a time zone almost every day, and I remember it was like Chinese water torture because you were just permanently jet lagged because it was changing every single day. You were losing an hour or gaining an hour, and depending on which way you're going, obviously, but I remember it just being murder. And I remember thinking, oh, how easy to just fly somewhere and you're jet lagged for a day or so, and then you're over it and you're, instead of being jet lagged for 10 days, an hour at a time. So that was painful too.
So 1 hour is fairly easy to adjust to.
But day after day after day after 10 days in a
Even
row.
day after day. But, this would have been like every 3 days. So I don't think it would have, and most Navy ships do that. We'll adjust. Yes, Chris.
So there was a similar question to this online that I'll modify a little bit because I think we've addressed some of this particular question, but related to jet lag, what advice would you give and how would you recommend someone that is going to land somewhere a few hours ahead without the option to gradually adjust? How would you, what advice would they have for adjusting to jet lag when they land?
Light is the secret. So, if you can take, like if you're flying from here to Europe, if you can take a night flight, get as much sleep. You just don't want to start out in a big sleep debt. So what you want to do is get as much rest prior to, kind of front load that rest so you're not exhausted when you take off. When you get there, light on the eyes, don't go to sleep. Look at the time zone that you're on and adopt those habits. That's what you want to do. Look around you and see, are these people going to bed? Are they waking up? That's what you want to do as quickly as possible. So, but light, I say lux prima, light is the secret. So, yes.
On that point, it was James Zachary, that was like hacking circadian clock using light. Have you looked at that? There's a artificial way to do it.
That's what we're doing. We actually have blue and rich. I didn't bring any of them over, Well, we have blue enriched white light. We have both glasses that you can kind of wear, these little lights that shine down into your eyes. We have the canvases, we have the white boxes, and that's what we'll probably be doing in our next Arctic study is looking at that. But we can also use that same kind of thing like on secure watch floors that don't have windows. So how can we help people that are doing night shift work and things like that? So, but yeah, we do have that, and we've been working with a company called Circadian Positioning System on that. We did a study recently, 2 years ago, in the middle of COVID, looking at how can we help aviators for working days or flying day flights? How can we rapidly retrain their circadian rhythm to fly night and reduce the risk? And that was again using this artificial light that we have over it. Of course, you're not going to get 100,000 lux that you get from the sun, but you wouldn't want that.
Locally with glass.
Exactly. Yeah. Anything else?
Question.
Yes, sorry.
So Peter, do you find that you recommend different sleep cycles depending on where the ships are? Like if they're further up north, did you recommend a certain sleep cycle? Whereas if they're closer to the equator, it would be another sleep cycle that you recommend?
No, pretty much, it's pretty much standard. So I think we have this we have to look at the ship and we have to say how many qualified watch signals. That's really kind of that's the whole the sticking point. So the big concern, how many sailors you have, how many are qualified to stand watch, and then from there you can either say, oh, I can only stand a 2-section watch. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, or I can only stand a 3-section or a 4-section. So that's really kind of, I think, the driving principle behind it.
Nita,
Yes.
can you answer from here so people can see you online?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
The submarine point that I was on submarine at some point, we had a small crew, like, hey, we're 15 you out there, 12 on, 12 on. And it sounded like you just said submarines have to be 8 and 16 now or something like that.
They're on 8 and 16, yes.
So how does that work? Is that like, we don't actually have enough, like, so you to sleep anymore for that team.
So now my understanding, I don't have it, is there anybody a recent submariner? So my understanding is they're all fully manned to a 3-section watch now.
So they must have gotten rid of other people or like with a full loaded boat, and they said we just send 14 more people. And I think to do the 3-section watch, we have to add make our team 21 people, 22.
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't really know, but I've had submariners who come by my office multiple times and said, I just want to shake your hand. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, yeah. So we'll have to talk. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, man. Question as a graduate of Sleep Deprivation University, you studied America's finest.
West Point.
Sleep Deprivation University. And we beat the Air Force Academy. Because we learned from that to have better sleep. One thing in that culture still is, we call it the slug nap. And so cadets will just sleep, right? And random times throughout the day. So on the question of naps, what is the best kind of practice for that?
Naps are great. So, the napping that I recommend is if you give yourself a 30-minute nap or a 2-hour nap. So we have sleep cycles that are about 90 minutes to 2 hours in length for an entire sleep cycle. And if you give yourself a 2-hour window for a nap, then you can go through one whole cycle and wake up on the other side of that feeling good. Or if you give yourself a 30-minute nap, we also have a thing called a nappuccino or a calf nap. You drink a small cup of coffee. Takes about 30 minutes for that to kick in. You do your 30-minute nap, you wake up and on the other side and you feel great. So calf naps, that could possibly help someone. Just not too close to bedtime. Yes.
I wonder if you, Nita, or anybody else has done kind of the macro study, because a lot of what you're talking about is operational and kind of tactical. And so the macro study seems to me something, I mean, there are many studies, but one I thought of as you're talking, the Navy, I think, was 15,000 sailors short of its recruitment goal.
Mhm.
And so that's gonna percolate through the system and pressurize the problems that you're talking about, because you're not gonna have
Yes.
enough folks to do things properly. And so they'll do them improperly. And they won't be good at retaining their sailors. And so the question might be, is it better to, you know, how do you trade off between the retaining people and the proper manning the watch system? Or not having as many ships to go because you can't crew them?
So I think that's the hard question that the Navy is facing. We don't have enough sailors. And the conditions, working conditions can be brutal. And so people may opt to get out or not to come in at all. So I think that improving this, teaching people how to sleep better, how to take better care of themselves, and teaching commands about that as well. Don't just unnecessarily fatigue someone, keeping them up just to go, you know, chip paint or whatever. So I think, you know, those kinds of things will have incremental effect on the Navy and on morale and all these things. But that's a big question, you know, maybe, and I've said that a couple of times, maybe we just need to take some of these ships off the line and take those sailors that are there and send them back to the other ships. So, but it's, you know, it's a huge trade-off. Yeah. Over here.
Speaking of that point, Navy standard is to gain an operational unit at a percentage of what they Navy actually accepts within the
Right.
and I think it's 80% of what the Navy provided.
Typically, yeah, Navy standard, yeah, the naval availability factor, yeah.
For discussion having with senior leaders, have you seen that item potentially move anywhere where they're starting to acknowledge that shortchanging our own assessment of their requirement, maybe not the best idea?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot, they recognize that. I think they do see that, and I think it's becoming more and more apparent. So I think the needle may be changing a bit. I hope so. Hope springs eternal.
Lita, you might want to talk about the Belial report and the optimal manning experiment.
Yeah, so I think it was, I'm trying to think what year the Belial or the optimal manning. The Navy decided they're going to do optimal manning. And so I don't know if you remember or read anything about that, but it's like, oh, we're going to cut manning and we're just going to optimize this. And so they cut all these positions. They cut at the time that you didn't go to the schoolhouse to get trained. They just sent you directly to the ship. So anyway, it's pretty brutal when they did that retrospective analysis, the Belial report. That it was just like this was a train wreck. This was not a good decision. But sometimes you don't know until you try it, you know, and I think that's what they were trying to do. But they obviously cut too much. And I think there's recognition of that. Now, you know, once you've cut that much, how do you come back? How do you make that complete recovery? I think that's the challenge. All right, I think I've outlasted everybody.
All right, we have snacks that Dexter and I do not want to have to carry back, so please eat many of them, take them. Your family wants snacks. There's snacks here, go for it, and let us please thank Dr. Nita Shattuck.